Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I need you to just forget about standard history books and normal timelines for a second. Today, we're exploring some truly fascinating ancient lore and Islamic tradition regarding the absolute dawn of humanity. We're looking at a completely different, newly formed world. We're talking about an era of giants, secret ancient sciences, and the profound legacy of Prophet Sheeth. So let's jump right in. Okay, let's dive into this. The source material presents a totally mind-bending claim about our earliest ancestors. According to these ancient traditions, early humans were not just, normal-sized folks like us. They were absolute giants. The lore suggests that their height could actually reach up to an astonishing 70 meters. That is a staggering number, right? It just completely shifts how we visualize those very first generations walking the earth. To really grasp the sheer scale of these claims, let's just think about a typical modern human grave for a second. It's, about 2 meters long, right? Now compare that to a site in a small village in Lebanon called Nabi Chit, which literally translates to the village of Prophet Sheeth. The shrine there, which has been venerated for centuries as his resting place, is approximately 60 to 70 meters long. That is about 35 times the size of an average grave today. Now, whether you view this as literal history or a symbolic myth, that physical contrast just brilliantly highlights the massive scale we're dealing with in these ancient accounts. Now, the sources don't just throw out these massive numbers and leave us hanging, they actually provide a really intriguing rationale for them. The narrative suggests that the environmental conditions of the early Earth were vastly different from what we experience today. We're talking about a time with potentially different atmospheric pressure, significantly stronger gravity, and a much more powerful magnetic field. Crucially, the sources emphasize an uncorrupted, fresh genetic pool that was operating at absolute peak physical capacity. Add to that the incredibly harsh, rocky mountain environments they had to survive in, and the result, according to the lore, was a biological necessity for extreme physical toughness. We're talking thicker bones, denser muscles, and, of course, towering heights. And it wasn't just their height that was completely monumental. Their lifespans were equally staggering. Prophet Sheeth is recorded in these traditions as having lived for 912 years, with some sources even pushing that up to 950 years. Just think about that for a second. Today, celebrating a 100th birthday is this rare, monumental milestone. But back in that lost era, living near millennium wasn't some wild exception. It was considered perfectly normal. Adam himself is said to have lived for nearly 1,000 years. It was just the natural reality of that first era of humanity. Section 1. The First Murder's Aftermath and Allah's Gift. Beyond their massive physical scale, this era was also defined by immense emotional gravity. The sources outline a deeply sorrowful timeline for Adam and Eve. Initially, Eve would always give birth to twins, a boy and a girl, to help populate the earth. But tensions started to rise when it came time for marriage. Qabil, or Cain, became deeply jealous regarding the marriage arrangement commanded by Allah, basically because he believed his own twin sister was more beautiful. This jealousy festered and grew, ultimately leading to the unthinkable. Qabil murdered his brother Habil, or Abel. It was the very first bloodshed on earth, and it plunged Adam and Eve into decades of unimaginable grief. But then, breaking that established pattern of twins, a total miracle occurred, the birth of a single, solitary male child. This single child wasn't just some biological anomaly. He was a direct spiritual comfort. The traditions say that when Adam held him, a divine peace finally replaced his long-held grief. Adam named him Sheeth, a name which in both Hebrew and Arabic literally means Allah's gift. He was bestowed specifically to console his parents' deepest sorrow. It was almost as if a message was being sent that what was lost had not been forgotten. And this single child was this incredible beacon of profound hope for the future of humanity. So the crucial takeaway here is how incredibly unique Sheeth actually was. He holds the profound distinction in Islamic tradition of being the very first prophet to actually be born on earth, since of course Adam was created in paradise. The sources also mention a really profound spiritual lineage here. A brilliant light, or nur, of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is said to have transferred from Eve directly to the forehead of the newborn Sheeth. On top of that, the texts point out a super fascinating physical detail. Sheeth was the first human to ever have a beard, as Adam, having been created in paradise, supposedly didn't have one. This symbolized a totally new maturity and a brand new era for mankind on Earth. Section 2. The Secret Ancient Sciences. Now, what's really interesting about this is that Prophet Sheeth wasn't merely a spiritual figurehead. The guy was a brilliant intellectual. The sheer breadth of knowledge attributed to him in these texts is wild. Ancient cultures, like the Sabaeans, for instance, revered Sheeth not just as a prophet, but as a master wise man. He's credited with possessing deep knowledge of alchemy, specifically understanding how to separate gold from silver and manipulate different elements. His expertise reportedly spanned astronomy, medicine, mathematics, architecture, and even agriculture. He also forged the very first weapons, not for conquest, but strictly out of necessity to defend his people against the growing lawlessness of Qabil's descendants. According to the traditions, Sheeth received 50 sahifas, or divine scrolls, but these weren't just your standard rulebooks of religious law. They contained profound, complex scientific knowledge about the nature of matter and the universe itself. And this knowledge didn't just vanish into thin air. Centuries later, during the Islamic Golden Age, legendary scholars like Jabir bin Hayyan, who is often called the father of chemistry, actually traced the foundational roots of their own scientific disciplines all the way back to the blazing forge of Prophet Sheeth. Section 3. The Night Classes. So how exactly did Sheeth acquire such profound wisdom? Well, a lot of it came directly from his father in these intimate nightly classes under the starlit sky. Adam passed down a very grave warning during these sessions. Whispers are more dangerous than swords. Think about that in our modern context for a second. Adam understood firsthand that humanity's fall didn't come from some massive physical attack, but from subtle, deceptive whispers in the heart, literally the exact same whispers that led Qabil to commit the world's first murder. Adam basically instilled a highly structured step-by-step defense against evil into his son. Step 1 was simply recognizing the enemy's voice and intent. Step 2 was understanding the methodology, realizing that corruption almost always starts subtly, as just a mere whisper or a passing thought. And step 3 was the crucial realization that human willpower alone just isn't enough. One has to constantly seek refuge in a higher power to actually defeat this enemy. This was the spiritual armor Adam gave to Sheeth to protect their righteous lineage. Section 4. A Tale of Two Societies. Armed with this spiritual armor, Sheeth had to navigate a rapidly dividing world. You see, that first murder had completely fractured the early human family, creating a really stark contrast between two entirely distinct societies. Qabil had fled far away down to the open plains. His descendants became entirely focused on materialism, wealth, and worldly control, and they completely forgot about spiritual accountability. Meanwhile, Sheeth and his followers stayed up in the harsh, rocky mountains. Their lives were physically tough and very simple, but their focus remained firmly locked on worship, faith, and mutual protection. It was a complete physical and spiritual divergence. Seeing this massive divide happening, Adam laid down a strict, unyielding law: total separation. The descendants of Sheeth were strictly forbidden from ever mixing with the descendants of Qabil. And this wasn't out of spite or hatred, it was a protective measure. The wisdom behind the law was a deep understanding that faith doesn't usually just shatter from one massive blow. It slowly, quietly fades through small, continuous compromises with an environment that has forgotten its spiritual roots. Imagine looking down from those harsh mountain vantage points. Sheeth people could actually see the expanding wealth, the lights, and the entertainment of the plains down below. It must have looked incredibly enticing to them. But Prophet Sheeth constantly reminded them of one core principle: glitter is not proof of truth. He taught them that the outward material success of Qabil's society was literally just a distraction from their inner spiritual emptiness. It's such a timeless reminder, right? I mean, how often do we mistake modern glitter for actual truth today? But you know how time works? As generations passed and the elders grew older, the original pain and trauma of that first murder became a very distant memory for the youth. The new generation, who were raised entirely in the mountains, started looking down at the plains not with caution, but with curiosity. They began to ask things like, why can't we make them? I mean, are they not our relatives too? According to the sources, these innocent-sounding questions were the very first seeds of future trials. They were opening a door that those whispers of deception were all too eager to exploit. Section 5. Adam's Final Request. Right as this generational shift is happening, the physical strength of the first man was finally failing. As his time drew near, Adam expressed this really profound, heartbreaking longing. He didn't ask for earthly riches or for more time. He simply told his children, "I want to eat the fruits of Jannah." This wasn't just a request for a meal. It was the ultimate soul-deep yearning of a man who vividly remembered the absolute perfection of his original home in paradise, and he desperately wanted to return to the presence of his Creator. Obviously, his kids were desperate to fulfill their father's dying wish, so they set out to find the most beautiful fruits they could possibly find on earth. But on their journey, they were suddenly intercepted. Strangers appeared before them on the path, but these weren't ordinary men. They were angels in disguise. They were carrying burial shrouds and radiating the unmistakable heavenly scent of Jannah itself. They commanded Adam's children to turn back, signaling that Adam's incredibly long journey on Earth was finally over. So this brings us to a massively pivotal crossroads in the ancient lore. With the foundational patriarch Adam passing away and that younger generation already starting to question these strict laws of separation that kept them safe, everything hangs in the balance. What does the arrival of these angels and the death of Adam mean for Prophet Sheeth and the incredibly fragile future of humanity? Will they hold the line in the harsh mountains, or is that glitter from the plains finally going to draw them in? That is a fascinating question to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the sources, and I will absolutely catch you next time.